Once again, and welcome to the Great Lakes Divide podcast with Bluebelly Tom Crawford. I'm Ryan Schuling, and some new music for you from Heather Frare and the Record Lounge. Circle the Drain by Soccer Mommy. Yeah, you heard that right. And going out, we'll hear Black Qualls by Thundercat. Now, these are going to be out very soon at the Record Lounge. All the newest music each and every Friday, including on this Friday, February 21st, that we're recording this podcast and going forward throughout the great year of 2020, whether it's one of the all-time greats and classics and rock and soul and rhythm and blues and everything that you want to get in the music world, you can obtain at the Record Lounge. Take a journey back through time, all your favorites that maybe you lost. Maybe you had them on CD at one point. Maybe they're on your iPod, but they don't give you that same sound and expansion and range that you get on a fresh pressed LP. And you can get the equipment to play all your records as well with hi-fi stereo equipment that's been thoroughly examined by an electrical engineer and ready, good as new for you to purchase in store. That's the Record Lounge in Rio Town. Well, it was a tale of two second halves for the Wolverines and the Spartans this week in victories that each team desperately needed. For the Spartans, we'll get to that in just a little bit. It's a game they couldn't afford to lose on the road against Nebraska, a team well out of the mix for either the NCAAs or the NIT. That's a game that if you lose it, it's a stain on your record and your resume. If you win it, it's just kind of status quo. And they came up with a tremendous defensive performance, outscoring Nebraska 47-29 en route to an 86-65 win over the Cornhuskers. Now, Michigan, it was kind of a similar script. They trailed at the half at the rack. Rutgers, one of the best home teams in college basketball this season. They had not lost on their home floor. They were 17-0 before Michigan came to town. The Wolverines have been noted for their road struggles this season, and yet they flipped the script, trailing 31-28 at halftime. They put the clamps down defensively in the second half, allowing just 21 points to the Scarlet Knights and beating Rutgers on the road 60-52. Now, this is a pelt on the wall. Rutgers is probably hovering around a 9 seed right now, still rooting for Steve Pikiell and for Rutgers to get into the big dance. He's done such a great job there, and I feel they're a deserving team. They still need probably at least a couple more wins to secure a bid. But Michigan did themselves tremendous favor with this victory in going 8-7 now in conference, 17-9 overall. In my last bracket projection, I had them as a 7 seed, and I think a 6 is in play, and their ceiling is probably a 5. And that's not a team I want to see on the other side of the bracket from me in any Selection Sunday pairings if I'm an opposing team, because Michigan is better than their record. We know that, because without Isaiah Livers, they struggle, and yet they were without him at Rutgers, and they found a way to win. And a lot of that had to do with Zavier Simpson, his continued solid play overall. Steve Pikiell with comments after the game on his performance and the performance of Michigan on the whole.
Seems like you threw different ball screen coverages and Simpson. Is that kind of the key to mix it up rather than contain?
I mean, that's like a difficult team. I mean, because you surround, he's an elite passer, and he's got elite shooters around him, and he's got a 7'2" center that's a 4-year veteran, and they got like a lot of weapons. And when you got that quarterback that can kind of slice and dice you, it's nothing's easy. I thought we did a pretty decent job guarding them. 2 different guys, different looks, different screen coverages, but at the end of the day, he still makes a lot of plays, and he does it both ends, the court. He's an elite defender too, so he's a good player.
What was your impression of Castleton in the second half?
Yeah, he came in and gave him great minutes. I mean, they got a terrific bench. All those guys are capable of playing, a lot of minutes at a lot of places. So, he came in. He's got tremendous length, and he gave them some good minutes. John, the last time, he killed us in Madison Square Garden. He came off the bench, doesn't play a lot. Davis, the big kid, shooting 85.7% from the floor. And that's a huge percentage. So they got a lot of weapons. And when you got a guard that gets them the basketball when they can score, it's a hard team to play. And they're in a good groove too now.
They certainly are. That was head coach Steve Pikiell for Rutgers, a team that Michigan has now beaten twice on the season, both Michigan and Michigan State, with 2 wins over a common opponent. In Michigan's 2 wins over Rutgers, Michigan State has 2 wins over Illinois, and those 2 facts are going to bode well come Selection Sunday for both schools. The tail of the tape for Michigan, the aforementioned Zavier Simpson, 6 of 10 from the floor, including a couple of early threes that helped set the tone. He finishes with a team-high 16 points. Franz Wagner, although he wasn't good from distance, was a great player overall in affecting the game with 12 points and 8 rebounds. Again, a rebounding guard from that position. He's done this time and again consistently. He's given Michigan what they need, and the backcourt performance was very strong, including David DeJulius with double figures off the bench. He had 10 points. Michigan didn't shoot the 3 well on the whole on the night, 6 of 23, but their defense was the story. They held Rutgers to 3 of 18 from 3, and just 35% overall on the night. As we bring in Tom Crawford, who watched this game closely, a struggle for Brandon Johns. He was really a non-entity. Foul trouble plagued him in this one. No Isaiah Livers either, Tom. How were the Wolverines able to overcome that with no presence from either one of those 2 at the power forward position?
Well, Ryan, the template for Michigan recently, I think in the back half of this year, or actually since this winning streak, is winning basketball games in a variety of ways, and when you have a team that can win in a lot of different ways, you have a heck of a team. I said this on my I did a video blog on Twitter the other day post game, and I thought it was arguably one of the guttiest wins I've seen in my 56 years of watching Michigan basketball. And that might be embellishing, but it was just all the circumstances involved. You have this core of your team, Isaiah Livers, and up until around 6:30, he might have, the thought says he might give this a go, and then finally it came down between 6:30 and 6:40. He's not going to play, and then you have to react to that. But Michigan with Livers is a 10-man deep rotation. That's a heck of a rotation. And when you got, and I'll even throw Adrian Nunez in there, the fact he didn't necessarily help him, but he didn't hurt them. He gave some quality minutes there. He gave 5 minutes to give somebody a blow, and I thought that was huge. When you have a Colin Castleton, as Steve Pikiell mentioned him, denoted him that when it was asked on him, my God, that is freaking pure money. In there, he had 5 points, 4 bounds, and he was perfect from the free throw line. This is a kid who, after the Indiana game, after everybody, the arena was being torn down, they were getting ready for a wrestling meet coming in there. He's out there shooting, getting up shots. I mean, this is a different team, Ryan. I tell you what, it's the way they talk about each other, the way they bond with each other, the way David DeJulius got emotional when talking about Isaiah Livers. I mean, this is just of all the years I've covered Michigan basketball, it's kind of unique. It's kind of cool. They're on a roll. And a big daunting task coming up. We'll talk about that in a few, about the Purdue game. But man, at 17-9, 8-7 overall, the fact they went 6 of 23 from 3-point land, which would have been a dagger of an L, which is done before. That went 5 of 23 against Michigan State at the Brez, and they still win the game. That's winning basketball games in different ways.
This looked real dicey for Michigan early on in the second half. They trailed at halftime by 3. They fall behind by 9, 37-28 after a pair of Ron Harper Jr. free throws, 17:40 to go, and Michigan still stuck in the mud offensively. And then they nearly double their point total, Tom. Over the next few minutes, they outscore Rutgers 27-9 to, again, turn the tables here and take a 9-point lead of their own. What was key during that stretch where Michigan was able to kind of accelerate into another gear offensively?
Well, boy, you bring up, I love your term, stuck in the mud. They were stuck in the mud at the first 6 minutes of the Michigan State game, the one at Chrysler, when it was like 3-3 at the 14:06 timeout mark. It's their fact their defense holds serves is kind of until the shots start falling. That's why this team is so patient. And Michigan actually gets a lot of points, energizes a lot of points. They got some breaks, some points off the fast break, off a couple of turnovers. That ignited them. And I think that the most key element in this game, and they were down 9 in the second half.
Yeah.
In comes Colin Castleton. We've already addressed that. But at that point also, you had kind of this team effort switching off of who was going to shut down Geo Baker. Geo Baker was red hot, one of their best players. He ended up with 16 points. He got virtually nothing in the second half. Why? A tag team effort from David DeJulius and Eli Brooks. Eli Brooks is starting to become a pretty damn good defender. He did it with Cassius Winston. It's defense, Ryan, and defense travels. And the fact defense travels, maybe that's why they're all of a sudden becoming a little bit better of a road team than they were. The MSG game was kind of a neutral. That's still in the road. They've swept Rutgers. Rutgers is a good team. So this is a huge breakthrough for Michigan. This team's on a roll, and Juwan's doing a heck of a job with his team.
Yeah, and the mental toughness it takes to go into a place like the RAC, and that place was jumping. It was loud. It's a smaller venue. The fans have flocked in. There's not been a lot to cheer about on Piscataway's campus in a long time, and this was a daunting task for Michigan, again, without Isaiah Livers, to overcome a 9-point deficit. They turn that into a 9-point lead. They hold on for an 8-point victory, 60-52. They've beaten Rutgers twice on the season. Neither was at home. One neutral court, Madison Square Garden, one here in Piscataway against Rutgers, and the first team to beat Rutgers this season on their home floor. Another tough night for John Teske, although I will say this, Tom, he had a couple key blocks in this game. He totaled 3 on the night, and what I like about Teske is despite his struggles, you never see that guy giving up, and it's not a lack of effort. Maybe it's a lack of execution and consistency with him, but they need him down the stretch. This is a unique game in that they were able to pull it out of the fire, like you said, without shooting threes well, without Livers, without really much of a contribution from Johns, who was in foul trouble, and really without much of a contribution from Teske or Austin Davis. I mean, I don't think I've seen a game like this from Michigan all year where they got virtually nothing out of their 4s and 5s, did not shoot threes well, and yet still won the game. And I think it goes back to what you just said. And this foundation was built under Luke Yaklich and John Beilein when he kind of turned the page defensively in his program. That's what really was the bread and butter for Michigan in this game, why they were able to win it, why they were able to, like you said, turn turnovers into touchdowns and extend their lead when this game looked like it might get away from them a little bit. And I think all due credit goes to Juwan Howard. This was a well-coached game for Michigan, and I think he deserves a lot of credit for the win.
Well, yeah, very good point. And talking about that defenses, and I'll go back to that Indiana game. I mean, Michigan switched up their defense from man-to-man to zone just to give IU another look, just to give IU something to kind of throw them off kilter, and it did, because Indiana was actually scoring pretty well against Michigan. So the fact that they switched things up, that's very Beilein-esque too, and Luke Yaklich as well. I mean, just giving him different looks, more to focus on. Talking about the offense, and Juwan is starting to do that, definitely. Back to Teske, really good point about Teske. He is still playing hard, and this kid has so struggled since the Illinois game in December in Champaign, and he's lost his moxie and his confidence defensively. But I'll go back once again to the Indiana game. He hit the floor like a swan dive for a loose ball, and it ended up being a layup just by his sheer hustle by Franz Wagner. That's a Teske that is going to contribute. And you and I have been going back on that for us. Hey, maybe they should even those minutes up, Teske and Austin Davis. Well, I had a chat with Tim McCormick, the former Michigan basketball player and a national analyst, and he says, no, the system's working. It's working with Teske starting and Davis coming out and getting his 14, 15, 16 minutes to spell Teske. Teske's not getting into foul trouble now because Austin's coming in before he gets in foul trouble. Yet it's still Teske is the guy that's starting. And sometimes you don't want to, if you got the sweet ingredient, if you will, the secret sauce of some guy coming off the bench, you do not want to mess with that.
Just a strange game. Michigan got out-rebounded in this contest, 37-34. Rutgers had one more assist. Michigan had one more turnover. I mean, if you look at any other stat but field goal percentage, you would think Michigan probably lost this game, but that was the key. Again, clamping down defensively. Geo Baker led Rutgers with 16. He was 7 of 16 from the floor. Ron Harper Jr. had 13, and Yeboah also had 10, but that was it for double-digit scores for Rutgers. And again, Michigan finding a way on the road. It doesn't always have to be pretty, especially in those hostile environments, but to get this win, I think it's a character win, a big defining win for Michigan. It could really propel them from a confidence standpoint, momentum standpoint. 60-52, once again, the final score. Michigan improves to 8-7 7 in conference play, right behind Rutgers, and with a game in hand. And, of course, they have the 2 head-to-head wins against the Scarlet Knights, trying to climb that ladder, get a better seed in the Big Ten tournament, maybe get to 1 or 2 wins there as well, and solidify their standing in the selection committee's eyes. The next test for Michigan will be Saturday, a 2 p.m. start Eastern time on ESPN at Mackey Arena against Purdue, another tough venue. Well, Tom, they got one down in Piscataway, the only loss handed to the Scarlet Knights on their home floor. What does Michigan need to do to go into Purdue and get a win over the Boilermakers?
Well, they got to defend, obviously, and basically, not turn the ball over, not have stupid turnovers. I mean, Zavier Simpson, and I want to talk about him for a second. We haven't mentioned it. This is one of the best games I've seen him play, was against Rutgers. Yeah, at 16-6, 5, and 2 points, rebounds, assists, and steals. Terrific. But Zavier has a tendency of turnovers early in the game. He ended up with 4 turnovers in this game as well. So he can't turn the ball over at Mackey, and you can't let Purdue, when they've had these blowout wins over these high quality teams, like getting ahead of Iowa 15-2 in the first 4 minutes. When the under 16 minute mark, it was 15-2 over Iowa. You can't have that happen. So if Michigan hangs tough early and just and just withstands that surge, that noise level, those bench seats at Mackey Arena. It's not like you're sitting in a chair back seat at Mackey. It's a very, very unique arena. That's why it's a high volume, a high number of people that close. That's where the noise comes in. Yeah, so taking care of the basketball and just defending. Once again, defense travels.
And this Mackey Arena for Purdue this year, they're a team that's clinging to their NCAA tournament hopes. They've lost 3 in a row, including one against, I think, is the best team in the Big Ten. I know everybody's going to say Maryland. I still think it's Penn State, and we'll see what happens when those 2 teams go head-to-head. But for Penn State to come in and beat Purdue by 12, get this, on their home floor this year, Purdue has beaten Virginia by 29, the defending national champion, 69-40. Now, Virginia's not what they were a year ago, but still, that's a pretty big pelt on the wall. They destroyed Michigan State by 29 points at Mackey. They beat Wisconsin by 19 in West Lafayette. They obliterated Iowa 104-68. And think about that for a moment. Luka Garza, that whole team that can shoot, and they've got great offensive players, held to 68 points. Purdue just boat raced them 104-68. They have since, like I said, lost home to Penn State and then went on the road, lost at Ohio State. The Buckeyes are playing better. And then at the Kohl Center, Purdue lost to Wisconsin by 4, 69-65. So this is a desperate, wounded team. This would be a big win for Purdue. Again, they've got a very strong net ranking. Now, that's what they use instead of the RPI now to determine seeding and whether or not you get into the tournament. But they're not going to be able to have a record like they have right now and probably get into the tournament. This is a must-win situation. They've got 3 of their last 4 games on the regular season at home, does Purdue, and they really, really need this game. Now, Michigan would like to have it, but they are definitely playing with the kind of vim and vigor that you would hope at this time in the season. I mean, think about this. The Wolverines have won 6 of 7 games. The only exception, that home loss to Ohio State. They've beaten Michigan State. They've beaten Indiana. They won at Rutgers, won there. And now they'll try to do the same at Purdue. That, again, will be Saturday afternoon, 2 p.m. Eastern, on ESPN. With Bluebelly Tom Crawford, I'm Ryan Schuling. You're listening to the Great Lakes Divide podcast, brought to you by the Record Lounge in Rio Town. They're located south of 496 downtown Lansing. Take Washington south. It's on the east side of the street. Plenty of free parking right out in front. Plenty of other shops you can walk around, stop in, but make sure you visit the Record Lounge first and foremost. Walk right in. They have storefront location right there. You can look through the windows. Aisles and aisles of record selection, the fresh pressed vinyl, the all-time classics, and the new music every Friday as well. A friendly staff, Heather Frary and her gang, and they can track down anything that you want, anything that you need. Rare recordings, they'll find it for you. Tons of connections throughout the state of Michigan, and then get it within 24 to 48 hours special order just for you. Like them on Facebook, follow them on Twitter. That's the Record Lounge in Rio Town. Turning now to the Michigan State Spartans, and this is a team, again, trying to find their footing. They had lost coming into this game against Nebraska in Lincoln 4 of their previous 5 games, including a couple on their home floor. I mean, this is like losing serve in tennis. They lost at home to Penn State. They lost at home to Maryland, 2 best teams in the Big Ten this year, and there's really no debating that at this point. And they go into Nebraska, and they struggled in the first half of this game. It's kind of playing down to the competition. A 3-point lead, 39-36, and Graham Couch with a very interesting article and insight in the Lansing State Journal if you want to check that out online. Kyle Ahrens, senior, who had a very good game off the bench in this one. In 22 minutes, he scored 14 points, hit 4 3-pointers, and this was the story for the Spartans on the night. They turned on the afterburners in the second half, outscoring Nebraska 47-29 and getting 3-point production from 3 different sources. Cassius Winston, usual suspect, 23 points. He was 3 of 4 from beyond the arc. Mentioned Kyle Ahrens and his 4 threes and how big those were. He added 7 rebounds to the mix there as well. And Gabe Brown became Babe Grown once again. You just switch the letters of his first and last name. Finally coming out of that flu funk he was in, he hit 5 3-pointers, including a stretch where it seemed like he couldn't miss. 17 points off the bench for him. How about that? 31 points off the bench from just those 2 guys, Ahrens and Brown. This is what Michigan State's been looking for, been needing so desperately, and they got it. And Kyle Ahrens admittedly went off in the locker room, said there were cuss words, tried to call his guys out. He's a senior. Cassius is too, but they needed that personality that was going to hold other guys accountable, and that was Kyle Ahrens in Lincoln, Nebraska on Thursday night. En route to this 86-65 win, Winston leads the way with 23 points. He was 7-11 from the floor on the night, had 6 assists, still had 5 turnovers, and that ratio is something to keep an eye on. You need Cassius at least at 2-1, preferably 3-1 like we've been seeing from Zavier Simpson of late. He was about 1-1 in this game with those turnovers. And Michigan State, this was a bugaboo. This was just maddening to watch. And if there's one thing I'm going to remember about this team this year, unfortunately, to this point, it's the inability to shoot from the perimeter and just giving the ball away offensively in transition for other teams to score points off turnovers. That's what killed them against Penn State. 22 turnovers in this game. Rocket Watts had 4 of his own. Mentioned Cassius with 5. Aaron Henry had 3, but a better game from Aaron Henry on the whole. This is a guy that filled other stat columns very well. 13 points, 9 rebounds, 5 assists. Another double-double ho-hum from Zavier Tillman, who said he finally got sleep on the road because he has a newborn at home, now 2 little ones, with his wife. He's living the married life. He's a grown man, unlike yours truly. I told him once before, he's got his life more together than I do. 10 points, 11 rebounds, said he slept for 11 hours in the hotel room the night before, and it apparently paid off as Michigan State got contributions from all quarters, including, how about Jack Hoiberg in this one? A nice gesture by Tom Izzo, allowing him to start. Now, this is a guy that usually only plays in cleanup minutes, but against his father, Fred, in Nebraska, the head coach of the Cornhuskers family watching, Tom Izzo just decided it was the right thing to do. Hoiberg started, held his own well, scored late, had 4 points in this one, and again, Michigan State en route to a 21-point victory. Tom, your thoughts on this win? And I'll start right there with Tom Izzo's decision to start Jack Hoiberg. Not every coach would have done that.
No, that's a great gesture, and to the reaction of Fred Hoiberg, seeing that in the locker. Hey, my kid, who's this number 10? Oh, they're starting Jack. I mean, that's what makes college basketball. This is why I love college basketball. The gesture that Tom Izzo did, I thought that's so cool. And the guy had 4 points. I don't like to self promote and beat my chest, but on my Tom's Take on Monday, all I said, for Michigan State, Kyle Ahrens, take his minutes from 15 to 22 to 24. There's your solution. I pounded and pounded in that. And what does Izzo do? He puts them in there, 22 minutes of effort, 14 points. There's your solution, because not only do you get a good shooter in Kyle Ahrens, you get some boards and you get leadership, on-court leadership, and I understand now you got in the locker room leadership. There's your solution. That along with Gabe Brown. I'll tell you what, of course, it helps Nebraska. You might want to cover him to have a 3 to 4 foot separation every time he had a look. It was amazing. I mean, Nebraska's not a very good team. Let's just be real. They're so undersized. But I thought this was a good win for Michigan State. Yeah, struggle on early on. Yeah, beat on each other at halftime. Pull away, generate some momentum, because your next outing, you got a tough competitive team, and probably the nation's best player, and Luka Garza coming in here, and the Iowa Hawkeyes. So this was a good win for Michigan State. This is about tinkering the engine, as I referenced before. Get ready for the tournament. The Big Ten championship in the regular season is out. There's no way they're going to get it. But they still can be, they still can create all that mayhem in March that they typically do. And so I thought this was a good win last night for Michigan State at Lincoln.
Yeah, to your credit, Tom, it wasn't just your take. You said it on this podcast on Monday about Kyle Ahrens, and I agreed with you. I didn't know where else it was going to come from, whether it be leadership, experience, consistency, shooting. You watch him shoot. He's just a very smooth, pure, refined shooter. He looks like a senior out there playing. He's physical. He's tough. He throws his body around for rebounds, and that's been the big concern is, can he stay put together in one piece? He's been very injury prone. I know that's what Tom Izzo's trying to avoid, but at this point, and we said this on Monday, you throw caution to the wind. You got to go pedal to the metal. This team has one objective now, and that's to get as far as they can in the Big Ten tournament and the NCAA tournament, and I think this game from Ahrens could be a pivotal point in the season for Michigan State. He's got to be that Matt McQuaid figure, and he's not going to be as good as defensively as McQuaid was, and he was a lockdown defender, and they miss Matt McQuaid so much. But the shooting, the leadership, the calm presence that he has out there, you just think that good things are going to happen when Kyle Ahrens is on the floor. And maybe you don't start him, but yeah, you bring him off the bench, you play him at least half the game. You got 22 minutes in this one, and I think that's the formula going forward. Love to see what I got out of Gabe Brown in this game in his 22 minutes. Efficient. How about that? 17 points in 22 minutes. That's efficiency. Malik Hall started, didn't play much. Hoiberg, that was kind of a tip of the cap. You get Gabe Brown back in the starting lineup. This would be my starting five for Michigan State. I'd go Cassius, I'd go Gabe Brown, Kyle Ahrens, Aaron Henry, Zavier Tillman. Get athletic, get up tempo, run in the half court. Get the outlet passes out quick and furious, and then maybe come in with Rocket Watts off the bench. You got to have another answer, I think, other than Foster Loyer at point guard. I hate to keep piling on the kid, but It's just not the answer. And you don't have a true point guard, a true one, so to speak, instead of Winston. But Aaron Henry can handle enough. I think Rocket Watts can play combo guard and point enough. He struggled in this game against Nebraska, was 1 of 8. But they've got to find that combination where they can afford to rest Winston minutes. He played 31 in this game. That's great. I would prefer to see Winston play between 31 and 35 minutes, not 36 and up toward 40. You're going to just wear him out. And one final thing I'll say about Michigan State at this point before we take a look ahead, Tom. And you're absolutely right. The regular season title's out. That's probably Maryland's. They're up 2 games in the loss column on Penn State even, and that's fine, all well and good. I can't think of a game or a team in recent memory that needs more out of the Big Ten tournament than I believe Michigan State does. In other words, Tom, the Spartans will benefit, I believe, from making a deep run in the Big Ten tournament, from having those extra games in this ultra-competitive Big Ten that, by the time you even play a second-round game in this Big Ten tournament, you're playing somebody that's likely going to the big dance. So if they could play that quarterfinal round, the semifinal round, even get to the championship game, just to play in those games, in those environments, is going to do wonders for Michigan State, a team that I think needs those tough games and challenges.
Yeah, actually, this year, Ryan, the Thursday games are going to have Friday type of quality from past years. It's crazy. If you're playing on Thursday, you're pretty damn good. I don't care. I don't care how you got there. Back to Foster Loyer, if I could for a second, and I'm not a pile-on guy either, but it does seem like, he's good against bad teams typically. And then against good teams, he really, really struggles. Well, he was playing a bad team and he struggled last night, I thought, in his 6 minutes of effort. Hey, for a guy who's great against Rochester Adams, they're not playing Rochester Adams anymore. This is it's unfortunate. I think this kid is not a fit for Big Ten basketball. And I agree with you. I'm telling you what, you got the solution. When Cash, you got to give Cassius a blow. You got to get him on the bench. You got to take that down to 34 minutes. And that is actually when I would do the Rocket Watts, Aaron Henry kind of shared point responsibility with a non-traditional point guard on the floor, and just run weave and not just do point guard-esque type of things, but share that burden a little bit of ball handling until you can get Winston some rest and get him back in the game.
For Michigan State, this next 3-game stretch is a true gauntlet. They are playing the top 3 teams other than themselves in the conference, with 2 of those on the road, and 2 of those against teams that just beat them at Breslin. The Spartans have lost back-to-back games in East Lansing. I can't even remember the last time they lost 3 in a row, but that certainly is in play on Tuesday night. And yeah, weird. The Spartans don't play this weekend. They're done. They're going to have a weekend to kind of refine, rest, relax, recharge, reinvigorate, practice, and then they'll take to the court on Tuesday night, 7 p.m., ESPN2, number 20 ranked Iowa. Luka Garza coming in. Weird quirk in the schedule. They haven't seen Iowa this year. Michigan's seen them twice. This is the only time these 2 teams play, unless they play again in either the Big Ten tournament or, heaven forbid, the NCAAs. Luka Garza comes in, probably the top candidate right now for Player of the Year in the Big Ten. He's been incredible down low. It's going to be a true challenge for Zavier Tillman or whoever they choose to put on Garza defensively. Bingham, I don't think, is up to the task physically. He's just not strong enough. Garza can take you outside as well. That's going to be difficult to account for. Can Zavier Tillman get out on defense? I think he's the guy, but that's going to take away from Zavier's abilities and energy on the offensive end. This is a fascinating matchup. Could turn into a track meet. Michigan State wants to run more. Iowa's a team that can score 100 without blinking, and a true test for Michigan State to snap that 2-game losing streak at home. And if they don't, then they go on the road in either event for tough tests at Maryland in College Park, and then at Penn State, a team that's playing really well despite a recent loss, before winding down the regular season at Breslin, with Ohio State coming back for the final game of the year. But they could really see their season go into a tailspin here if they don't win this game at home against Iowa, because there's every chance that they could drop both at Maryland, at Penn State. But if they get this one against Iowa, they at least have a bit of a firewall there. So you look at the Big Ten standings right now, Tom. Maryland atop at 12-3. I've got them solidly as a 2 seed right now. They've won 9 in a row. Great team. There's no doubt about it. Michigan State should have beaten them. We're up 7 with about 2 minutes plus to go, and they just flatline. And the Terrapins go on a 14-0 run to close out, and in so doing, probably clinch the regular season Big Ten title in the process. Penn State, again, not a team anybody wants to go against. They are relentless. They are tough. They are balanced. This is a team that I think could make a very deep NCAA tournament run. Iowa at 10-6 as well. They've been playing quite well of late. And then Michigan State 10-6. Illinois gets a key win. They and Wisconsin are at 9-6. Rutgers falls to 9-7. Michigan 8-7. Indiana, Ohio State, Purdue, 7-8, 7-8, 7-9, and really it's kind of the cut line there for the NCAA tournament is probably Purdue right now on the bubble. I think Indiana still has some work to do as well. But the state of the Big Ten race, Tom, how you feel about it, and just your quick to take thoughts on the Spartans and the Wolverines as they head down the stretch run of the regular season.
Well, I mean, I think we both agree. Maryland's got the upper hand, with a 2-game lead, and the other ones are just scrapping and clawing for a second. And like I say, the Big Ten is just brutally difficult, challenging, and whoever survives the Big Ten tournament will be very well prepared, if you will, to go to the NCAA tournament if they're not flat out burned out on the whole process. But back to Iowa for a second. I cannot say enough about Luka Garza. This guy reminds me of an old Golden Gloves boxer, who's talented, who's taken it to the basketball court. He's been bloodied up. Every time I watch him play, they're sticking gauze somewhere on his face because he's so tough, and he improves so much in the off season with his footwork, and then he's got the perimeter dagger 3 to throw in the mix. How do you stop this guy? This guy is going to be a nightmare for Michigan State. Now, look, I think Michigan State can win. They're playing at the Breslin. They've dropped 2 at the Breslin. Will they drop 3? That's the odds of that happening are slim. That being said, it's Iowa. This is going to be a really interesting match on Tuesday night. I think you'll learn a lot about Michigan State in this game. I really do, as far as where they stand moving forward into the Big Ten tournament.
Got to cut down the turnovers first and foremost, because Iowa will kill you if you give the ball away, and then continue the shooting that we saw against Nebraska. Granted, nobody's going to mistake Nebraska for being a quality team, but you still got to hit the shots, and Michigan State did. Gabe Brown, Kyle Ahrens, Cassius Winston, take the load and the burden off of Cassius offensively. You're going to have to match guns with Iowa, and we'll see what happens on Tuesday night. That'll be our next podcast recording if Tom can stay up late enough, and I think that he can. And that'll be Tuesday night after that Iowa game, the next time that we'll talk to you, recapping both Michigan and Michigan State. One final note here as the assistant coaching staff for Mel Tucker and Michigan State football continues to assemble itself, Tom. Jay Johnson, I don't want to say was the first to report this. This was speculation on my part, but an educated guess based on contacts and sources I have here that Jay Johnson, who had been the offensive coordinator for Colorado, follows Mel Tucker now to Michigan State. He will be the OC along with coaching the quarterbacks. I like the move for continuity's sake. Jay Johnson also has experience in the Big Ten at Minnesota. Maybe some people don't recognize that, but that's true. Courtney Hawkins comes back, a former great wide receiver for Michigan State, wore number 5, had a decent NFL career in part with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He'll coach receivers. Chris Kapilovich will coach the offensive line. Always good when you have a Serb on your offensive or defensive line or in your fitness room. And I'm saying that, of course, full bias. I'm half Serbian myself, but he is a very highly regarded offensive line coach. A couple SEC teams tried to poach him as well, but he stays with Mel Tucker and follows him over. Ron Burton stays, holdover from he was looking like he was going to Indiana, then did a 180, came back for the defensive line. Looks like Mike Tressel will coach linebackers, demoted, you could say, from his defensive coordinator role. Harlan Barnett comes back to coach defensive backs. I think he's an outstanding coach in that regard. He was a defensive back. As a coordinator, maybe not so much, but they stepped down both Tressel and Barnett, who at one time were co-defensive coordinators for Michigan State, and that is the next hire that I'm looking at, Tom, is who will be the defensive coordinator for the Spartans to bring this all together. Mel Tucker's a defensive-minded guy himself, so this is a very curious selection for me to see where this defense could go from here and who's going to lead it. They've got their offensive staff basically in place. I'd like to see Cedric Irvin. He's been campaigning openly on Twitter with responses to my tweets and otherwise on the internet that he'd like to come back and have a role on this coaching staff, and maybe that'll come to fruition. But your thoughts on the staff that Mel Tucker's assembled for Michigan State, Tom, and what's left for the Spartans in terms of what they need?
Well, I mean, and there's one other hire that I think just as we're doing this podcast, Ryan, Colton Pouncey just tweeted out about an hour ago that Michigan State hired former Wisconsin wide receivers coach Ted Gilmore as their new tight ends coach. Nice. Ted Gilmore's been passing game coordinator for the last 3 years at Wisconsin, and they've done a pretty good job with that. So, yeah, I mean, the makeup, a lot of Spartans in the mix here. I would really be surprised if Cedric Irvin was hired. But we'll see how that plays out. The Hawk, Courtney Hawkins, is back. You know, I mean, who's coming from Flint Beecher High School. It's funny because initially I thought this was we're gonna have Tucker's just gonna go clean, a fresh slate, if you will, and go from there and bring some new blood in here. And he did bring Jay Johnson in as the OC. Keep in mind, they were 100th in the country last year in offense, so it's not like they were a juggernaut. But, hey, if there's familiarity, and, they were 5-7 with the 81st toughest schedule out of 130 in the country. So, I mean, the metrics don't all look that impressive, but he knows what he's doing. He's working with who he wants to work with. It'll come together. I tell you what, Harlan Barnett to me is a really, really good coach. And I think Spartan fans, getting him back in the secondary, the old no-fly zone thing might be coming back into play.
We'll keep an eye on the coaching staff updates there leading into the spring game for Michigan State and Michigan football as well. I do want to get a final thought from you as a Michigan alum, Tom, on this latest breaking news that has now gone national. New York Times article saying University of Michigan investigates doctor sex abuse claims. This goes back now over 50 years to the late 1960s. 5 former patients have alleged that now late University of Michigan physician sexually abused them during exams. One accuser saying that Dr. Robert E. Anderson's actions over several decades made him a sexual predator. Just how Michigan should handle this going forward and what it might uncover and what lessons it might teach as we continue with this movement to try to get these sort of stories out in the public sphere.
Yeah, well, Dr. Anderson, the ironic thing, the guy died 12 years ago, which is a little different situation than what we had with Nassar. And I think Michigan is going to learn from Michigan State. And when they've already moved on it, they've hired an outside firm, not anything internal, not investigating internal, outside firm. That's already into play. From my understanding, there's 2 individuals who have come forward. And this goes back to what people said on the Nassar thing. Why are you coming out now? 12 years after the guy has passed, you're coming out. And this happened in the 70s. The 70s is 50 years ago. I mean, this is some of this. And listen, I'm not a victim in this stuff, so I can't even really speak on this, competently. Thank God. But I mean, that ceases to amaze me. These delays in this reaction of 50 years. 50 years is a long, long time to come out with something. And I'm curious to know why now. Why are you coming out now as opposed to maybe when he was still alive? And now he's dead, and he can't defend himself as he's dead. These are strange things, but I do like the fact Michigan is proactively trying to get to the bottom of it, and they're seeking out they're prompting. They want people to come out. They're being very, very proactive on how they're approaching this situation, and that's refreshing to hear.
They are, but it has been several months since Ward Manuel, athletic director for U of M, had been made aware of the first report that came from a former University of Michigan athlete writing to him in July of 2018, and now these are coming to light publicly here. To Tom's point, again, this stems back many decades, as many as 50 years. President Mark Schlissel of Michigan said in a statement, quote, "The allegations that were reported are disturbing and very serious. We promptly began a police investigation and cooperated fully with the prosecutor's office." Always going to talk about these difficult subjects on this podcast, and hopefully Michigan, like Tom said, will learn from the mistakes of Michigan State and nip this in the bud, get in front of it, find out what they can, fully cooperate with an external investigation, nothing to hide, daylight drives out darkness, and then be done with it, and then put it behind them and have it never happen again. And hopefully we're in an environment and a time now where you don't wait 12 years, 20 years to come out of fear of retribution or retaliation or anything like that, and that's very real. And on University of Michigan's campus, Michigan State University campus, these are young student athletes that need our protection, and for somebody to look over them and to guarantee their safety on a college campus. And that is a bare minimum essential requirement if you're to send your son or daughter to one of these institutions, especially prestigious ones like Michigan or Michigan State. One more time, Michigan State, Michigan, both winners on the hard court, and we'll be back to it as Michigan takes on Purdue at Mackey Arena, 2 p.m. Saturday. ESPN will have the televised coverage for Michigan State. They will next be at home against Iowa Tuesday night, 7 p.m. Eastern Time start on ESPN2, and we'll record our next podcast that night, reflecting upon both those games as we come toward the end of the month of February. You know what that means? March Madness. That'll do it for us from here for now. For Blue Belly Tom Crawford, I'm Ryan Schuling, going out to the sounds of the Record Lounge. And Heather Frare, you appreciate her submissions today. You're hearing Black Qualls by Thundercat, available soon at the Record Lounge in Reotown. The Reotown Marketplace off Washington, that's south from 496 in downtown Lansing. Like them on Facebook, follow them on Twitter. That's the Record Lounge in Reotown. Until Tuesday night, have a great weekend, everybody.
I know I got it.